You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. It's great to be back with you today. I've got a special guest who has an amazing journey in her own lifelong leadership quest. She's running 5 companies right now, and uniquely, she comes from the construction industry. So, yes, I put she and construction together, so we're going to maybe break some stereotypes here and as we get into our discussion. But I'm excited to introduce Ann McNeill. Ann, welcome to the show.
Doug, thank you for the opportunity to share. Excited to be here.
So I made you give me your rundown of all your businesses, but share with the people what you told me about your journey.
Well, my journey, actually, the journey question started actually with this book, Thinking for a Rich by Napoleon Hill, December 31st, 1979 at 9 p.m. But I'll start the journey there, but I'll fast forward the journey to say 10 years into reading the book, I started, within that time, I started my first business, which was the MCO Construction and Services. And I did that while I was in my corporate job as an entrepreneur, but utilizing the principles of success espoused by Napoleon Hill and masterminding every week to learn how to sign up for classes to start a construction company and then learning how to do that. But then in that journey, about 20 years into the journey of my construction business, I realized that I was adding such great value to my clients and providing consulting services that I eventually started a consulting business called MCO Consulting, where I provide outreach, monitoring, and compliance to publicly traded firms that work on public land. So you can just imagine many of your firms, architects, engineers, and contractors, the major firms, we provide outreach and consulting services to those firms. But along the way, on this journey, people would ask me to come and speak. And my youngest daughter at the time became a professional speaker at 13, and I would drive her and I said, people pay for this? So we became members of the National Speakers Association, and that's been over 20 years. And I am also a professional speaker. The name of that company is called Constructive Speaking, Inc. And we speak nationally and internationally to firms regarding personal development. But along that journey of starting those, we incorporated the International Mastermind Association to help individuals to create free and fee family and friends mastermind groups. But along that journey of self-discovery and personal development, I began to realize that there were many people who looked like me that needed help in the form of an association. And I created the National Association of Black Women in Construction, which right now we're about 15 years running, and we're about 22, 23 cities across the U.S. And so those are the 5 businesses where we help elevate individuals to go to the next level in their business and their lives.
So I guess the big question is, when do you find time to sleep?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because as a part of how we mastermind in 10 different areas, Doug, and the first one is spiritual. We set goals in those areas, but the second is family. And I'll just use that as an example. I'll come back to that, just run through them. It's okay, I run through them real quick?
Please, yes.
10 areas of our business and life. First is spiritual. Second is family. Third is financial. Fourth is health. The fifth is education. The sixth is personal development. The seventh is your business or your career. Number 8 is recreation. Number 9 is civic involvement. And number 10 is creative. And so we set those goals for 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. I'm in my 40 plus year now. And that, when you ask the question, how do you find time? I suggest we make time. And it's just a little bit amount of time, but it stretches over a long period of time. So we make the time for those, family, for example, friends, work. And since it's been a long journey, we're getting just a little bit better at understanding what's most important, but also who's most important in our lives.
That's great. And it reminds me of a tool that I use in my own coaching, which is a kind of a classic coaching tool. It's a wheel of life. You take those 10 categories and you plot them around the circle. and you start in the middle and grade out from 0 to 10 on the outer bound, and you sort of grade yourself in each one of those areas. How are you doing? Where are you? What do you aspirationally want to be doing different? And when you connect all those dots, you get the image of the classic bicycle wheel. And we all know, if you've ever been guilty of running your bicycle into a curb, you put a big dent in that rim, you're not going to have a very smooth ride after that. So you want to keep that circle as well rounded as you can to make things be smooth and optimal. And yeah, you can push a little bit to push the boundaries, or maybe you've overcommitted in an area and you need to pull it back a little bit so you can make that round circle again. And great framework. I love that, and have often I've gotten to a place in my own coaching where when I hear people talking about different issues they're expressing, inevitably I go to that wheel and I think, yeah, your wheel's not in round. We need to talk about that. So that's great. Well, let me ask you this. Let's, if I may, focus a minute on the construction elements. As I told you in the green room, I have a passion for real estate and construction. I've spent many years doing that myself, or being around it anyway. How did you actually enter the construction game?
Well, while I was in corporate, my husband and I worked at one of the number one firm in Palm Beach County immediately after graduating college. He graduated summa cum laude. I graduated, thank you, Lordy. Some people get that on the way home.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that at the individual meetings at work, that many of the individuals who I worked with during work hours, they kept talking about they purchased this property and they invested in this property. And so eventually we bought our own home. And my husband and I, at each day, we would leave to go to work in two different cars. And we saw a sign that was for sale by owner. We called the number and we'd say, look, we live in the neighborhood, could we buy the house? We're very young, we don't have any credit. Shockingly, majority of the people said yes. We had no idea what was going on. We were very young. And at one point on our street, we owned 3 or 4 properties on the same street we lived on. And so we would go to the library and we learned how to make repairs. And one day I come home from work and my husband says to me, he calls me baby, said, baby, if I had to do it all over again, I would not go to college. Now I'm shocked because we've invested all this time and energy getting all of these degrees. And I'm literally standing in the door and I said, excuse me, he said, no, I don't think I would go to college. I said, what would you do? He said, I'd go into construction. I said, what? You're kidding me, right? And he said, no, we graduated from Florida Memorial University. He had a master's at Temple University at the time in where we were living in West Palm. And I said, why would you do that? He said, think about this. He said, I did the math. He said, these guys that come in here and they give us quotes on doing this work. Many of them did not finish high school. And he said, and what they make an hour is more than you make a day on that corporate job. I dug, I said, wait. I'm still standing in the doorway. I'm still standing in the doorway with my pocketbook, as they used to say a long time ago, on my arm. I said, excuse me. He said, listen, I did the math. What they make in 1 hour of work is more than you make an entire day. And they have no college debt. They have any of these. And so I said, well, what would you do? He said, I would go to a trade school. And I started a construction company. I said, that's what I'm going to do. And he started laughing. And he realized I was not kidding. He said, but listen, you have your corporate job, you have the family, you're working on a master's degree in finance, and you have all of these different things. I said, I understand that, but I believe and trust in you. And if you say that's what you would do, I'm going to go to trade school. And that's how I ended up in construction. I went to trade school while working on all of the other things. And I began to learn how to build a house from the ground up. Now, that trade school knowledge gave me an opportunity within a year, actually, to work for then in the 80s now, one of the largest Black contractors in the United States out of Atlanta was coming to Florida and was looking for someone to manage his office. So I took a leave of absence from my job while working on my master's degree, and I learned how to do the business of construction in terms of a large scale, but at the same time, I volunteered every day after work to work with the local contractors to actually learn how to do the work hands-on.
See it being
That
done.
was the beginning of my journey into this industry. And now, 40 some odd years later, I can tell you it was one of the best decisions I had to make.
And that's a great story and very much good advice that I definitely agree with. I don't think college is for everybody. I think any young people that might get a chance to hear this, pay attention to what Ann is telling us here. The opportunities that are out in all manner of trades and in something like construction is huge, and we're always going to need that as a society and a culture. We're going to need that, and those jobs are not going to go away. And depending on where you live, a lot of those jobs have been filled by immigrants that have come in, and that's all fine and good. And I'm not making a political statement here, but there is plenty of opportunity for young people that are wondering what they really want to do to pay attention and check it out at a minimum. There's so many valuable things to be learned. I know a young man also in your neighborhood who owns more of a commercial construction operation, that it is a generational deal. He bought the company from his dad. I mean, they didn't just do a handoff, they did a transaction to make it a sale, but he's doing quite well. And it's been a bit since I've talked to him, but when I was last talking to him, he was running a $40 million business. And I went out on his work sites with him, and we toured some of the projects they had going on, and he had successfully created an amazing culture of proficiency and high performance. And all of his subs were bought into the plan. They knew what they were expected to do. They knew the level of quality they were expected to deliver, and so on and so on and so on. So there is a major leadership component there as well, to have that vision of what you want to accomplish. It's not just building the next house or just building the next property, but creating something that is known for vision and value.
Yeah, I just want to add to something you said about this idea of leadership, because I would strongly suggest one of the ways I was able to be successful in this industry early on is because I did not know a lot about construction, but I knew more about business and how business should operate as a part of leadership and leadership skills and styles, especially in the area of reading. And I started by talking about the one book, but because we were in a mastermind group, we would read literally a different book per month. And what I learned in the process of starting my own business is that the mindset superseded the skill set to run and operate a successful business. So when you talk about leadership skills, it really hinges on developing the leader within, if you will. And you can take those skills and they're transferable to almost any industry. But what I'm finding is that when you bring those skills into the construction industry at any level, you actually have an advantage over many of your competitors.
I would agree with you, and I too have seen that in my years working in and around this industry, because at the end of the day, even with technology and more impactful tools that are available, it's still a people business. If you're going to be a general contractor and build a property, you're going to rely on subcontractors to come in, and guess what? Those are other businesses that are run by other people. So your ability as a leader to influence and impact the people around you, not just dictate, go lay that slab or, go put up that wall, that's That's a very narrow, task-oriented mindset, and I know that maybe the popular impression of what happens out on the job site is just that, and there's a degree of it. There's a place and time for that, but more importantly, to really truly accomplish the best for the bigger picture, it's that idea of bringing those people together and getting them on board for a greater good.
Yeah, absolutely right. And when you mention about the idea of the people skills, I often ask my clients when I'm providing coaching services about their reading. If, again, going back to the relationships and the skills that are required, mental skills that come from whether it's coaching, whether it's consulting, whether it's going to workshops, seminars, and reading or podcasts and these different kinds of outlets. But again, having and making a priority to have some kind of personal development program in the area of leadership and including in that. And I'm thinking about a number of authors that I like to read. For example, like Jeffrey Gitomer, when talk about sales, and there's so many different authors that really speak to. For example, Harvey Mackay is one of my favorites. Jim Rohn in terms of listening. But again, when you're coming from a place of leadership in the area of construction or any particular industry that you're in, I go back to this idea of the personal development that's required. And oftentimes we don't think about the fact that it starts with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then the individuals we work with, whether they're inside of our organization or outside of our organization. And I'll just share a quick story. I love to read Stephen Covey's book. He has a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Families. And in the back of the book, he has over 550 different references for the book. Now, what's interesting for me about this is, and we talked earlier about families and the time, we talked about time in terms of how do you have the time? And I say, suggest you make the time. So in his book, he talks about having a family mission statement. Now, why is that important? Because in our companies, in our organizations, whether it's for profit or not for profit, we have a mission statement. But what about the family? So when we talk about leadership, we can lead at work, but where is the leadership at home? When you talk about having a statement that is created and developed by the members of the family that everyone is willing to live by, just like it works. So I just want to share that. So we're talking about, people skills. It does not stop at work.
Right. No, good point, and thanks for sharing that. It is so critical, and again, without making a political statement, there's a lot to be said for what's going on in our homes and families in the modern world because of perhaps pressures of work and otherwise. There's a lot of erosion out there in the basic familial unit, and I know that for a fact because I've got adult kids that are educators and they struggle with it every day. Kids show up at school and there's no telling what kind of home life they came from to manifest their behaviors, their attitudes, their disciplines or lack thereof. And it's a huge challenge that is there. But I like that point. And as business owners, helping develop the people on our teams, the people that have taken jobs in our companies and have come on board. Part as you were describing your journey, I was thinking about a gentleman I know, and I've told this story before, but he owns a plumbing company in Denver. And one of the classic things among the trades is if you own a company and one of your people comes up and says, I'm going to resign and go start my own business, the tradition in the trades is to say, you're dead to me. Get out of here, get off my job site, go away. And there's this tension that happens, but this gentleman has done a 180 on that. When one of his plumbers comes to him and says, I think I want to start my own business, he said, his answer to them is, hang with me for 90 days, and I will show you everything you need to know about running a plumbing company. I will open the books. I will open my story. I will, you can shadow me. I'll show you everything you want to know. And what last time I talked to him about it, in recent memory, he had five individuals come up, and after doing the 90 days, four out of the five said, "You know what? I'm not going to go start a company. I'll hang with you. This is a good deal, because at least in his situation, back to your point about who makes what in an hour, his master plumbers can make anywhere from 200 to 240,000 a year without any headaches of running a business. And so when he shows the complexities and the challenges to these people, four out of five of them said, "No, thank you for sharing. I'm in. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." And that's not, I don't think that's being manipulative. I think that's being incredibly generous and thoughtful of respecting somebody else's dream. And the one person that did go out has started a company and has been reasonably successful, and they help each other,
Exactly.
because there's always overload. One or the other is faced with opportunities greater than what capacity they've got. So I'll just pick up the phone and, "Hey, can you cover this for me today?" And, there's a quid pro quo there that works out very nicely. And if he had said, "You're dead to me, get out of here," that ongoing connection would never happen.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to just come back to the point you made about three out of the four decided to stay after they were able to count the cost. And one of the books I like to read is called Main Street Millionaires, and it's called The Acres. It's by an organization called the National Association of Investment Clubs, and they were called NAIC 25, 30 years ago, and they changed their name now to Better Investing. And I became a member of that organization back almost 25 years ago. My youngest daughter and I both, she was about 6 or 7. And I share this because 20 years later, which is, in the future, I realized that by investing a $20 bill over 20 years in something that I know, like, and trust, because of the education and learning how to be a better investor by learning how to analyze stocks. We created, my daughter and I, a podcast about during COVID, and it's called #MyInvestingStory. And I was journaling one day, Doug, and I was just thanking God in my journal for my investing journey. And this is what I wrote. I said, I thank God for my investing story. And all of a sudden I put a hashtag in front of that, and I thought about my journey was not a good one because someone had taken some money, they didn't steal it, I gave it to them, never to see it again. And I turned that information back on myself and said, why didn't I know how to analyze stocks, how to invest? So I started learning from this organization. Now, this is the point I want to make. During COVID, we decided to interview individual volunteers of the organization. Now, we're all volunteers. We don't get paid anything. We're not selling anything. And Doug, I would tell you, out of 200 individuals that we interviewed, one per week, can you take a guess how many were entrepreneurs? And 90+% were sitting on 7 figures. Take a guess how many were entrepreneurs out of 200?
I would think probably 199.
You get one more guess, Doug. One more guess.
All 200?
This is leadership. 2.
Really?
And let me tell you why. And I'm sharing this story because of what you shared about the 3 that decided to stay. But they had the benefit of seeing what it would look like in the future.
Counting the cost. Yep.
Counting the cost. You see, as investors, as individual investors, who are educated consumers, who are educated investors that understand the benefit and the power of compound interest of a $20 bill once per month. Those individual investors, only 2 were entrepreneurs after they made lots of money. The benefit was the fact that, and you've read the book, maybe the Millionaire Next Door, Automatic Millionaire. Many of these books that talk about the person who's living right next door to you, the house is paid for, the car is paid for, the car is probably 10 years old, they have no debt, but they are regularly investing $20 to $30 per month in something that they know. And they're able to do that by going directly to the corporation and not through brokers and these different, but it comes from education. And so I did that analysis after COVID. I went back and I said, it's interesting how everybody we analyze, everybody we interviewed on this podcast, they're just regular people, just regular people. And I didn't hear many talk about their business. And I started asking the question, no, we don't own a business, we just invest. And so I say that because, again, as an early investor, we're talking about leadership now, leadership of self, right? Reading, understanding, and I'll give that website if it's okay. It's betterinvesting.org, and it's a free membership at the bottom. We're not selling anything. I say that because if I knew, Doug, before I started my construction company, that you could, like the 3 guys who decided to stay, maybe I would have stayed on my job. I'm not sure. But just maybe if I understood the benefit and value of understanding the power of compound interest. I'd heard it before, but I really didn't quite understand how it worked when you actually did it every single month. So I just wanted to share that because some of your listeners may be interested in
you raise a very interesting challenge in my mind, and that is, and I was speaking with someone yesterday about this very topic. It takes an incredible amount of risk tolerance and risk management to become an entrepreneur. And most people, maybe to your point, the data that you work with proves the point. Most people, when they really start opening the book and looking at what it's going to take, they realize they don't have the tolerance for that risk. That the certainty of getting that corporate paycheck is far preferable, and then they can implement whatever personal investing program they want to, which comes with far less risk. Still risky, all investments are, as we all know.
Exactly.
But the perception is far less risky than being out there all by myself trying to make this business work. And I have done a lot of work over the last several years with this phenomenon that's going on right now, entrepreneur through acquisition, with all the baby boomers that are wanting to exit their businesses. There's a great opportunity out there. But if anything, what I learned, and I've probably coached close to 100 people that raised their hand and said they wanted to do that journey. And in fact, out of that 100, very few did. And for a couple that did actually get all the way to the closing table and acquired the business, it wasn't long before the reality of what they had was undoing them. And it's a cautionary tale for anyone that's still thinking about that. For those that have the right risk tolerance and attitude, it's an amazing opportunity. There's some very favorable financing you can get with the SBA and make it happen. But you still, at the end of the day, you got to be able to go to sleep at night and not drive yourself crazy worrying about tomorrow.
I share with my clients, it's interesting you share that. I thank you so very much. When I share with my clients who are considering in early stage, I said, I ask also the question when I'm speaking, I ask, people to raise their hand if they have children. And most people raise their hand. And then I asked, how long did you carry that child? And people would say from 9 months to, incubation. And I said, no. How long did you carry that child? And then they're understanding, what do you mean, Ann McNeill? And I said, listen, when you start a business, it's like a baby. It's literally like a baby. And if we're honest and we birth children, we may carry that child somewhere between 18 to 20 plus years. So how then do we expect to start a business? That's a baby. And within the first year, you expect it to cover itself and to cover you and all of the expenses that the two require. They're still on pablum. They're still on baby food. You must be willing to understand that you will carry that business for a number of years before it can cover itself and eventually cover your salary. Please do not leave your job. And that's a visual that people can understand very quickly, because once you make that decision, I did it. So let's share with your audience. I did make that mistake. While I was on that corporate job, I thought I had it all going on. I left my job too soon. I had to beg my job back. And the next time I left, I promised I would not ever leave again until my company could cover itself and cover me. But that's a visual that I created, Doug, for my clients.
I like that.
Yes,
I like that.
It's a baby, you've got to carry it.
That's right. And it's so totally true on all accounts. Well, Ann, I think we're about up on time here for today. Thank you so much. Tell people the best way to get a hold of you directly.
Absolutely. The best way to reach me is through my website at annmcneill.com. That's ANNMCNEILL.com. And I always like giving out my cell, because that really is the very best way to get me quickly. And I do answer. And that number is 786-546-0184. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ann. And folks, we will have that information in the show notes as always. So do hop down and check that out when you get a chance. If you would like to hear more about Ann's journey or several of these amazing organizations that she's a part of. But I do want to remind you too, we have a video version of this show. And if you're listening right now on your streaming device, you're going to love Ann's red glasses. You got to check it out on the video. Really good stuff. And I'm sure that's your trademark. I know I saw it in a lot of your PR stuff that I was given, but kudos to you for that. But with that, folks, I think we're about wrapped up. If you need to get a hold of me, you can go to my website at dougthorpe.com, and that's Thorpe with an E on the end, and check out some of the giveaways we've got, some of the assessments and other tools. And as always, if you would like just a one-on-one free courtesy discovery call, I'm happy to do that. No charge, no hard sell. Just would love to get to know you and see what you've got going on with your situation. But I think that's it for now. We're going to close out, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.